Welcome to episode 120 of the People's History of Ideas podcast. Last episode, we discussed Mao being sent by the Front Committee to work in western Fujian, and at the end of the episode, Mao had just come down with malaria, while Chen Yi went off to Shanghai to discuss the line struggle going on in the Fourth Red Army's party leadership with the Central Committee. After that final July 29, 1929 Front Committee meeting, which came right after the end of the Western Fujian Party Congress, Mao went into an extended convalescence to recover from his malaria. During this time, he was moved around a bit, which may have in part had to do with keeping him secure while the communists fought off a suppression campaign launched by the Comintern against the Western Fujian Soviet. Mao was able to read reports and newspapers and give some guidance during the less intense moments of his sickness, but mostly he was suffering through the disease and trying to get over it. After the Front Committee meeting, Chen Yi made his way to Xiamen, then by boat to Hong Kong, and on another boat from Hong Kong to Shanghai. Just to refresh your memory about what was going on with the party center in Shanghai, we talked in episode 114 about how, although the general secretary was Xiang Zhongfa, Xiang was not really an effective leader, and in fact Zhou Enlai and another leading communist, Lisan, were in a contest with each other for practical leadership of the party throughout 1929 and up until April 1930. And when Chen Yi got to Shanghai, Zhou Enlai and Lisan were delegated to work out the problems in the Red Army with Chen. Chen Yi wrote a series of reports on the situation in the Fourth Red Army, and Zhou Enlai in particular held a series of discussions with Chen Yi about his reports. While the discussions covered a range of issues that had come up for the Red Army, of particular importance was the issue that had most divided Mao and Zhu, the issue of how much control the party should exercise over the army. Chen Yi raised the issue of the relationship between political commissars and military commanders like this, quote, "Political workers and military officers frequently have disputes, just as in the old days in the National Revolutionary Army." End quote. Here Chen's referring to the whole experience of the National Revolutionary Army from back before and then during the Northern Expedition when the communists played a key role in politicizing the army. You might remember episodes 30 and 31 where we spoke about Zhou Enlai's role in introducing the political commissar system into the National Revolutionary Army. Chen continued that there were four ways in which political workers and military officers could interact. Quote, 1. A political worker can be equal to a military officer, just like a husband and wife, with the result that they argue every day. 2. The political worker's authority can be restricted to just political training, but in this way the military officer's authority is too great and the political worker becomes like a concubine. 3. As in the Jiangxi Red Army 2nd Regiment, that's a reference to the troops in the Donggu base area, which you might remember Mao was really impressed with the political control that the party had over the army there. The military officer must take orders from the political worker, and in this way it becomes a father-son type of relationship. Or 4, the military officer and the political worker are equal, but the party secretary always dominates and all work is accountable to the party branch. End quote. The Politburo met on August 29th to discuss the situation in the Fourth Red Army and decided that Mao should be reappointed as secretary of the Front Committee. Despite the fact that Politburo members seem to have agreed that Mao might have been a bit heavy-handed in his leadership style, they were much more concerned about the turn toward extreme democracy that the June 22nd Red Army Party Congress had taken. You might recall from last episode that the Congress had adopted a resolution which described the principle of centralized leadership as a, quote, tendency that would lead to a patriarchal system, end quote. As you can imagine, the Central Committee itself did not take particularly kindly to that opinion. The Politburo also decided to recall Liu Angong. Clearly, from their perspective, he had completely bungled his job as being a representative of the Central Committee within the Red Army leadership. Basically, this guy whose whole job was to reassert greater Central Committee control over Mao Zedong and Zhou had arrived in the army and immediately played a role as a catalyst in bringing to a head the long-simmering dispute between Mao and Zhou over party control of the army. Then, Liu used his position to assist in resolving that dispute in a way that undermined centralized authority in communist organizations on principle. In essence, this was the exact opposite of what he had been sent to do. As it turned out, before he could make it back to Shanghai, Liu Angong ended up dying in battle on October 21st while leading a column of troops in difficult fighting as the Red Army expanded its conquest of western Fujian. Anyways, after the Politburo meeting of August 29th, Zhou, Enlai, and Chen Yi worked on a letter which was finally completed on September 28th and which is colloquially known as the September Instruction, but which is officially the directive from the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party to the Front Committee of the Fourth Army of the Red Army, which is the title that you will find an edited version of the letter listed under in Zhou Enlai's selected works. The letter has 8 sections in the version published in Zhou's selected works, although there's a 9th and final section dealing with relations between Mao and Zhou. This section has never been made public, but it apparently criticized both Mao and Zhou even-handedly and called for them to patch things up. You might recall from episode 80 that Zhou went directly from the train station to Zhou Enlai's apartment in Berlin in 1922 to tell Zhou his story and to join the Communist Party. So Zhou is another person who had a long-standing personal tie with Zhou from his time in Europe, and this may have had something to do with easing Zhou's path back to patching things up with Mao and accepting Mao's return to the leadership of the Front Committee. The whole letter is worth reading if you're looking to immerse yourself in this moment in the life of the Chinese Communist Party. I've included a link to Zhou's selected works in the show notes. To give you a sense of the most relevant things that were said in the letter regarding the political struggle between Zhou and Mao over the party's political control of the army and the political role that army soldiers should or should not be playing, I'll just read you a couple of the most relevant paragraphs. The first paragraph that I'll read is bullet pointed as the problem of centralization. Quote, "All power in the party is centralized in the Front Committee as the leading organ. This policy is correct, and we must not deviate from it. The charge of patriarchalism must not be used undiscriminatingly to weaken the power of the leading organ and to serve as a cover for ultra-democracy. There is no doubt that in dealing with any question, the Front Committee should first take a decision and then refer it to the subordinate organs for discussion. It will not do to take decisions only after soliciting agreement from subordinates or to delay decisions while waiting for their opinions. To do so would weaken the power of the leading organs at higher levels and have a bad influence on party life at the lower levels. It would be the height of ultra-democracy. In the recent debate in the party, your committee displayed this weakness. This was a shortcoming." End quote. Here, Zhou is pretty clearly coming down on the side of reasserting the authority of the Front Committee as the centralized leadership of the army, and this reinforces a point made just a little earlier in the letter under the bullet point, democracy in the army. Quote, "The Red Army is not an organization like a trade union or peasant association. It is a combat organization constantly locked in bloody fighting with the enemy. Its command must be centralized. It is true that we should encourage the soldiers through political education to act of their own accord, but the principle of centralized command must not be shaken. Democracy can exist in the army only under centralized leadership, the extent of democracy being determined by the circumstances. It should not be without limit, for that would hamper the consolidation of army discipline." End quote. The letter also clarifies the Central Committee position on the political use of Red Army soldiers in a section titled "The Red Army and the Masses." To give you a sense of the thrust of what is argued there, I'll read the first paragraph of that section for you. Quote, In the past, the Front Committee has neglected the day-to-day struggles of the masses in the areas reached by the Red Army. The Red Army is the concentrated expression of our class strength. Landlords flee at the news of its approach. Under its military protection, the courage of the masses redoubles. Naturally, they are engaged in military or political activities, but the party must never neglect the many unsolved problems of their daily life. However, the party has overlooked this question in the Soviet areas. When passing through places where the masses have not yet been aroused, the Fourth Red Army should not only raise political slogans but also look closely into the daily needs of the masses, and then lead them through their everyday struggles for a better life to political and even armed struggle. The masses themselves need this kind of struggle, not just the mobilization of military strength or daily exploits by a few brave people. Such struggle will unite the broad masses around the party. We should lay particular stress on this when helping in the work of the local party organizations." End quote. As you can see, this letter came down pretty heavily on the side of Mao Zedong, although the wording that Zhou and Enlai uses in this letter is much more leaning on this emphasis on day-to-day struggles, which we see in the language of the party center coming out of the Sixth Congress of the party that was held in Moscow. This idea of winning over the masses through work in day-to-day economic struggles, which the party center was particularly emphasizing in regard to what it hoped to do among the working class in Shanghai and other large cities, but was really sort of unable to do given the high levels of repression in the large cities. And but apart from this sort of shift in language and emphasis, this paragraph is very much, and the rest of this section, the Red Army and the masses, comes down very much on the side of Mao Zedong in the dispute with Zhu De, in arguing that the party, the Red Army, really does need to be engaged in political work. But in Zhou Enlai's classic diplomatic fashion, there's an important nod to some of Zhu De's criticisms in a paragraph bullet pointed as arguments over organizational matters. Quote, "The slogan, 'Let the party take charge of everything,' is illogical in principle as well as in practice. The party only exercises political leadership through the work of the leading party group. The present system, under which the Front Committee has command over the Army headquarters and the political department, is only provisional. The Front Committee should not concern itself with everyday administrative affairs, which should be handled by the administrative organs under the supervision of the political commissar. Rather, it should concentrate on giving guidance to the Red Army's political, military, and economic work and to mass struggles. The slogan, 'All work should come under the party branch,' is correct, but it means that all work should be done through, not by, the party branch, and it does not conflict with the party's democratic centralism." End quote. As you can see, there's an implicit acknowledgement here of some of Zhu De's criticisms that Mao was taking personal responsibility for directing too many things, for trying to micromanage the Red Army to some degree. Although clearly, the overall thrust of the letter is to criticize the tendency toward what the Central Committee called ultra-democracy, and to affirm Mao's stance on the importance of party control over the Red Army and Red Army involvement in a variety of communist political activities. Meanwhile, the Fourth Red Army held its 8th Party Congress in late September, directly following the capture of the Shanghai County seat in western Fujian. As if to illustrate the point that Zhou Enlai was making about ultra-democracy and the September instruction, which would not yet have arrived in Fujian, the Congress got bogged down in endless discussions of minutiae. As one participant wrote in a report, quote, "Because of the practice of a democratic system from bottom to top, each meeting was locked in an endless debate." End quote. No preparations had been made for the meeting, and each question, big or small, was debated, and often no conclusion was reached. The report continued, Quote, "On the question of the party representatives' authority over the Red Army's laws and regulations, no solution was found after 2 days of discussions. Finally, it was decided to ask for instructions from the Central Committee. The Eighth Party Congress of the Fourth Red Army was bogged down in a disorganized state for 3 days without any result. This was a tendency towards ultra-democracy at various levels of leading bodies." End quote. The Front Committee had sent word beforehand asking Chairman Mao to attend. Chairman Mao, he's far from chairman at this point, and it's a bad habit. Anyways, asking Mao Zedong to attend the Congress. Mao wrote back that, quote, "All my life, I have been carrying out meticulous investigations and exercising close supervision over work. This is a thorn in the flesh of Chen Yi's doctrine. Chen Yi wants me to curry favor in all directions, but that is something I cannot do. I cannot return casually before the right and wrong are distinguished in the party of the Fourth Army. What's more, I'm not in good health. Therefore, I'll not attend the Congress." End quote. As we can see, Mao emphasized his political objections more than his illness, and directed his ire at Chen Yi, who would have still been in Shanghai as the chair of the Front Committee. The Front Committee responded by issuing Mao an internal warning, another mark on his permanent record, and ordered that he attend the Congress. Mao had to be carried to Shanghai on a stretcher and arrived only after the Congress was over. When the Front Committee members saw how sick Mao actually was, they left him alone to continue recovering. As it turned out, Mao got lucky in being forced to go to Shanghai because there was a famous doctor there, and after 10 days of treatment by this guy, Mao started noticeably improving. By late October, Mao was able to rejoin the work of the Western Fujian Special Committee. Meanwhile, Chen Yi returned to Western Fujian from Shanghai, meeting with Zhou on October 22nd, and convening a Front Committee meeting to build consensus on November 18th. This meeting accepted the Central Committee's decision and formally asked Mao to come back and resume his position as secretary of the Front Committee. In late November, when Mao got the letter from Chen Yi asking him to take up the secretaryship again, he returned to Chongqing, where the Front Committee was then located, with the troops who had been sent with the letter, and Mao, Zhou, and Chen Yi held a reconciliation meeting. At this meeting, everyone indicated their acceptance of the September instruction. Mao accepted the criticism of his micromanagement style of work, and Chen Yi indicated that he had learned a lot during his 2 months in Shanghai. Later, he would refer to this time as a period of tremendous political education for him, essentially a political training course, and criticized his former positions. Mao said that when he wrote and criticized Chen Yi when he initially refused to go to the Eighth Party Congress of the Fourth Red Army, that he had not been in good spirits because of his bad health and had written some disheartening words because of that. And so things were patched up between Mao, Zhou, and Chen. Meanwhile, Kuomintang agents had gotten word of Mao's illness and begun spreading rumors that he had died from tuberculosis. These rumors spread far and wide, and in fact got picked up by the Comintern, which ran an obituary for Mao in early 1930. It's another sign of the difficulties in communication between Moscow and the Chinese Communist Party that these Kuomintang rumors, which ran in Chinese newspapers, got picked up by the Comintern. The obituary ran like this. Quote, "According to news from China, Comrade Mao Zedong, a founder of the Communist Party of China, originator of China's guerrilla forces and one of the creators of China's Red Army, passed away at the Fujian front after suffering from long-term TB. This is a great loss to the CPC, the Chinese Red Army, and the cause of the Chinese Revolution. Comrade Mao Zedong was called the political leader of the Zhou-Mao Red Army. Within the scope of his leadership, he entirely implemented the resolutions of the 6th Congress of the Comintern and the 6th National Congress of the CPC. As a Bolshevik of the international community and a staunch fighter for the CPC, Comrade Mao Zedong fulfilled his historic mission." That wasn't the whole obituary. The actual obituary runs about 1,000 words, but gives you an idea of how these obituaries were written by the Comintern, what they thought was important. Mao as not as so much as the innovative guerrilla leader, but Mao as the executor of the decisions of the party and Comintern congresses. Anyways, the obituary served as proof of the regard that the Comintern had for Mao. And this palpable expression of Moscow's regard for Mao would serve as something of a shield for Mao in some of the inter-party political fights that are coming up. Interestingly, this obituary has been misinterpreted in some of the historical literature as a sign of murderous intent against Mao on the part of his opponents in the Chinese party and in Moscow. But in fact, it was just the opposite. It was the Comintern picking up on Kuomintang rumors that had made it into the news, and then the failure or inability of the Comintern news people to confirm this news with the Chinese party before running the obituary. And definitely this obituary was an indication of their regard for Mao, not a desire for his death. Anyways, I think that's it for now that everybody's gotten together and gotten reconciled. We'll pick up how the newly reunited leadership of the Fourth Red Army proceeds in our next episode. Until then, be well.